Story 1. A coworker was featured on Supernanny. They had a pretty good experience filming and were so excited for their show to air that they hosted a watch party. I'm sure you can imagine what's next. The way the show was edited made the parents look so bad, like neglectful bad, and made the kids, who were pretty wild, look even worse. It ended up being a pretty awkward watch party. Story 2. I'm a little bit late to this one, but my younger siblings, mother, and then stepfather were on a program in the United Kingdom called Mums on Strike in the mid-2000s. The premise was that the mother would be sick of doing everything around the house and would be whisked away to a luxury spa for a weekend, leaving the clueless father in charge of trying to take care of the household duties. A lot of the conversations and scenarios were faked. I supposedly visited them for the weekend, but I did multiple different shoots across a few hours on the last day of filming, then went back home. They'd cause fights between the siblings by purposely creating situations where one was favored over the other, so the others would throw a tantrum. There was a shoot on location in our local town center, and they encouraged my little brother to run off into all sorts of different shops, causing hilarity as my stepfather tried chasing after him with two other children in tow. Mealtimes were a bit of a farce as well, as it was a weekend. My stepfather had to cook a traditional roast dinner. The production company intentionally supplied incorrect ingredients to make sure my stepfather looked like an idiot. They filmed my reaction to him trying to add beans to the roast a few different times so they could pick the best one. In the end, after they'd got all the footage they wanted, they sent one of the production team out to the chip shop to get us some actual edible food. Too long, didn't read. Contrived, exaggerated, sometimes faked, full of drama. Story 3. I was on Scared Straight, and my episode never even aired because they only select a very small amount of footage to make it look a lot worse than it actually is. Most prisoners were pretty nice. Story 4. There was a program here in Spain that was like Supernanny but for teenagers. One of them was a guy who lived with his grandma and had very violent behavior. During the show, you could see how the guy changed and started having a better relationship with his grandma. But I guess it was just an act because when the television crew left, he killed her. Story 5. I don't know if this counts, but I was on an episode of Made on Music Television. If anyone remembers that show. It was my senior year of high school, so about 7 years ago. People gave me criticism about it forever and still do. I was made into a screamo singer. The experience was interesting, to say the least. The money and flight trip to New York City, though at 17 years old, made the whole embarrassment worth it. Plus, I work in the broadcast business now, so it really opened up a lot of doors and showed me a career I love. Seeing kids now that were in my shoes, so fascinated by entertainment media, makes me so genuinely happy. If anyone is interested, I'll tell more or answer questions. Not sure if that's the kind of show you're looking for. Story 6. A friend of mine worked on Nanny 9/11 in New York City. Nothing on that show happened unless the producers approved it. They would come up with scenarios and plot points to film. You don't just shoot TV shows like that and hope that something magical happens. They created every issue. Reality TV is not real. Edit. The camera crew who worked on Nanny 911 also worked on other shows like Real Housewives of New York, Kitchen Nightmares, and Hell's Kitchen. The film business is a very small world. Story 7. Like 3 years ago, I lived in a big 5-bedroom house with 4 other friends in college. The house was in an episode of Supernanny. We found out because our nice neighbor literally gave us a signed headshot from Joe Frost as a gift out of the blue. He literally told us, "I think you all would like this more than me and get a kick out of it." It made our week, and we found the episode online and watched it. I asked about the family to the neighbor, as our house was rented out and owned by a property company. He told me after the show the parents fought all the time, lost all of their money due to the 2008 crisis, and lost the house to foreclosure. The picture stayed on our mantle for 3 years, and I thought about that family every time. Story 8. One of my friends in grade school was on Nanny 911 as a child, maybe around 5 years old. There were a lot of kids in her family, and one of the biggest problems the nanny had with their household was safety. She baby-proofed the entire house and lectured them on safety precautions they had to take in their lives to ensure that the children wouldn't get hurt. She even gave them all helmets to wear whenever they rode bikes or four-wheelers. After she left, many of the safety precautions went out the window, and later my friend told me that they still had the helmets, but they were all sitting in a dusty corner. Story 9. I went to an all-boys correctional school 40 miles into the high desert in Washington state. A couple of other guys there went on shows like this and they never worked, hence being at the correctional school. The school did pretty well straightening most of us out. However, unfortunately, there are always a couple of guys who just won't follow rules. If our school couldn't help you, you would be sent to the other place, which was basically a terrible juvenile prison in Mexico that was run by U.S. Marshals. One day, one of these marshals came to give a talk. He spoke about the other place and basically scared the life out of us. At the end of his speech, he said, "And unfortunately, one of you is coming with us today." And we all simultaneously panicked. He said the name of the kid he was taking. We'll call him Colin. He then told Colin to empty his pockets, take off his shoes and belt, and placed him in handcuffs. The director of the school said some encouraging words to him and asked if any of the students wanted to say goodbye or wish him well. Dead silence. Then his roommate stood up and said, "I packed your stuff. You had no bags, so I put all your things in some trash bags. Oh, and I'll miss you, I guess." A piece of Colin died that day. I never heard from him or about him after that day. Based on the rumors about that place in Mexico, it's possible he could still be there, and it's been 7 years since that day. Wow, this blew up even more than I could have imagined since last night. So many of you have asked if I'll write a book and how you can hear about it. Yes, I am going to write the book thanks to you kind Reddit users that have shown so much interest. I think the best way to follow up about the book is to follow my Reddit, and I will post updates from there. Reddit users, you are all awesome. I never in a million years thought my experiences would be worthy of a book, but you have shown me otherwise. I'm very excited to write this out and publish it for you. Story 10. Didn't end up on it, but my family was approached to take part in a German version of the reality show, The World's Strictest Parents. Die Strengsten Eltern der Welt. The reason being my father is somewhat well known in my country for being a bit of a wild man. Looks like a Viking, very into the outdoors, fishing, hunting, etc. They had found a special of him on 60 Minutes and a few clips of him adventuring online and thought that Germans would enjoy watching bad kids being set straight by the bear man. Anyway, the interaction was done through a middleman, so to speak, who outlined what would be required of us and what small compensation we would receive for going along with it. At the outset, it seemed fine, even a little exciting. We had had close ties with a lot of exchange students in the past. We lived in a very small community in the mountains, and we all loved traveling. And my father didn't seem to mind the sound of helping out some struggling kids and possibly showing them a different side of life. Not necessarily that hunting and the outdoors are the only way to go, but more to open their minds a little and take them out of their comfort zone, etc. We watched a few clips of the show online and decided that we were laid back enough as a family that the drama wouldn't really wind us up or anything. Well, alarm bells started ringing after a bit more correspondence with the middleman. He started insinuating that there would be times where the kids would be told to play up situations, and that we would have to either roll along with the stage drama or actively join in and amp it up for the cameras. My dad laid it out pretty straight, saying he'd be happy to take these kids under his wing and show them some pretty cool adventures. He had glacier crossing, hiking through rainforests, caving, whitewater kayaking, hunting, or at least watching him hunt, and tons of other activities across our country all planned out. I had just become a scuba instructor and even offered to take them out diving on geothermal vents. But they really stressed the whole people watch the show to see bad kids act crazy. So that's what you're expected to encourage vibe. We politely turned them down at this stage. A few months later, the middleman actually emailed us and told us it was probably a good idea that we hadn't gone along with it. Apparently, they never paid him for any of his work organizing host families or setting up scenarios. I well dodged a bullet there, I guess. All my friends in Germany seem to think so. In summary, a German reality show wanted us to encourage struggling teens to throw temper tantrums and make my dad look like an angry bear man. We turned them down. Story 11. I didn't go on, but some classmates went on Supernanny or Nanny 911, cannot remember which. They lived rather close to my friend, so I went over to his place to watch the filming and such. The nanny stayed in their neighbor's house across the street, and the kids' behavior didn't improve for a very long time after the nanny left. From what I remember, they were trouble all through school. I lost contact with all of them during middle school. Just remembered the parents ended up divorcing not too long after the show. Story 12. I lived in India. Once, when I was in 6th grade, these foreign kids showed up with a bunch of cameramen. Speculation went wild. We thought our terrible principal probably wanted to create a cool image for the school and was making some kind of weird advertisement. Years later, I saw a YouTube clip by complete chance of world's strictest parents. It was my school and those exact kids. They had come to an Indian family whose children went to my school. The episode was a lot of drama. The parents were kind of obnoxious, at least for the episode. However, the last I heard from a few friends was that those parents were fine and their children are doing reasonably well. Not sure about the foreign kids who came. What a small world. Seems like ages ago. Story 13. I went to high school with a kid who was on Supernanny when he was about 11. Apparently, his and his sister's behavior weren't all that bad, and one day a camera crew just showed up at his house. He also told me they were trying to force an emotional scene where he would hug his mom and say he loves her forever or something, and he was like, "No, that's silly." And they were like, "Please." And he was like, "No." They settled on "Love you, Mom." Story 14. I had a friend on World's Strictest Parents. She was approached by a producer late one night at a McDonald's because she was 15, drunk, and wearing a stolen police hat. Apparently, the producers hang around looking for kids there a lot. Anyway, she did her parent swap, was moderately wild, came back, and decided she wanted to be a chef. I don't think she finished at culinary school. She had a baby at 19 and is a great mom to 2 kids now. Story 15. I was on Supernanny. My siblings and I were out-of-control kids, and my parents frankly didn't know what to do. I liked being in front of the camera for the most part. It's like a mini time capsule I sometimes watch every once in a while and witness how cringy I was. Nanny Jojo set up this reward chart for when we were good. Heck, once they even filmed me in timeout, haha. Story 16. One of the couples on the Supernanny show got recognized and reported to the police by their neighbors. I can't remember the name of the family, just that they had a few children and that the older one had sometimes missed school to watch the younger ones. Story 17. I had a friend who was on the first season of Nanny 9/11. According to her, there really wasn't anything wrong with the kids behavior-wise, but there were 7 young girls in the family and 3 were triplets. The craziness was dramatized for the most part, and the real reason why her parents decided to be on the show was for the paycheck so they could build an addition to the small house they had. Their father passed away very recently due to lung cancer from responding to the September 11th attacks. He was with the New York City Police Department and worked overnights, so they ran that house very strictly. All the kids turned out great, and they're all beautiful and unique young women now. Story 18. My aunt was once on Jeremy Kyle, which is essentially a British version of Dr. Phil, but with families dealing with issues like substance abuse who take lie detector tests. Sometimes it can be really serious, and other times it involves trivial matters like tests to see who stole the lawnmower to buy drugs. Her ex-boyfriend wanted a DNA test to see if the child was his. Surprise, surprise, it was, and months later he left her anyway. Now my aunt has 6 children by 5 different men, and she constantly lectures me about getting a job when she's 32 and has never worked a day in her life. Story 19. My uncle's family was featured on Extreme Home Makeover due to a rare condition my cousin has. They got a brand new house, car, and mostly paid vacation. My grandparents drove out to the big reveal. They stood in the crowd of actors shouting, "Move that bus," for 3 to 4 hours during countless reshoots while waiting for the host to show up. They ended up trading the car because it was impossible to insure for at least 6 months due to the new model. They installed an entire fish tank as a wall in my cousin's room, which ended up leaking and causing water damage to almost the entire house, including the basement. The crazy home temperature control cost a fortune, which compounded with everything else they had dealt with in a 6-month span, caused them to just sell the house in the end. Story 20. Not really relevant, but along the same theme of parents and kids being told to overact and stuff. When I was 13, my parents and I were interviewed for a British Broadcasting Corporation show called Living with the Enemy. It was for an episode where the parents were to spend time with the band Cradle of Filth because their child was a fan and they supposedly disapproved. My parents weren't being outraged enough, and it was suggested they should be more upset about their precious small child liking such a band because it would make better television. My parents just didn't have it in them because they really weren't that bothered since I was a good kid. The family who ended up on the program were massively overdramatic, and the kid was 18, so probably not the same impact as it would have been with me, an oh-so-impressionable little girl, had my family cooperated. I also still have the interview tape over 20 years later as they sent it to us, along with a bunch of signed band merchandise for me,